It's the last day of ACC.11 and the I2 Summit, but there are still important trials and scientific sessions making headlines. And we'll bring you the take-home messages from this meeting starting right now. Hello, I'm Dr. Randy Martin, and welcome to CardioSource Video News. We're wrapping up the ACC's 60th annual scientific sessions here in New Orleans, and to help you figure out the important developments that you can integrate into your practice, we're going to go to our excellent panel of experts. Dr. Peter Block. Peter is Professor of Medicine and the Director of the Structural Heart Program at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta. Next to Peter is Dr. Nalini Rajamannan. Nalini is Associate Professor of Medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago and also the Previa Cardiology Group in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And Dr. Tony DeMaria. Tony is Professor of Medicine at the University of California in San Diego and the Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. Now we're going to have an overall recap of the highlights of the meeting, but first we thought it'd be important to examine some of the late-breaking clinical trials that coming out today. Peter, what struck your fancy?
I like Magellan today, Randy. Magellan, rivaroxaban is such a cool drug, it sort of rolls off your tongue. And it's also a cool drug in that you only have to take it once a day. So rivaroxaban in Europe has been tested against in patients that had hip replacements and knee replacements. Looks like it's a great antithrombotic drug, decreases DVTs and so forth. Really is in place of Coumadin, a good anticoagulant. Now we have it in high-risk patients that are hospitalized, patients with high-risk surgery, with cancer, other very high-risk reasons for having DVTs, and they in fact then did and figured out whether it was better than enoxaparin. Turns out it is better than enoxaparin long-term if you continue it for 90 days, and at 30 days it is the same.
Okay.
So instead of having a sub-Q anticoagulant, you can take an oral rivaroxaban, and it seems to me that hopefully the FDA will go ahead and recognize that this drug is something that should be brought to the United States.
Tony, or Nalini, do you have any comments on that?
I thought the high point was that these are non-surgical patients, many of them with cardiovascular disease, congestive heart failure, so very applicable to us. I still think the fact that they tested rivaroxaban against nothing for the last 5 weeks after the ENOX, they didn't give any additional therapy, leaves a question as to whether there could be alternate therapy there that might be equivalent.
So I'm not sure, Tony, you want to give somebody enoxaparin for 90 days?
No, what about enoxaparin followed by warfarin?
Okay. Nalini?
No, I totally
You want to
agree.
get in the middle of this discussion?
No.
She's the rose between the thorns.
No, I mean, what do you think about the study?
Well, I agree with both of them, and I think, at the end of the day, it's what's going to be easier and safer for our patients. So really, I am kind of the rose between the two of you guys.
Well, the cool thing is that there's not an excess of bleeding, which is really the other side of this. You didn't mention, Tony, and I think that's a huge step forward.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we're at an exciting time with oral anticoagulants, I think. Nalini, any studies this morning that sort of got your attention?
Well, I was really interested. There was a study that in the Young Investigator competition looking at an ET antagonist in acute MI and showed improvement in terms of microcirculation and ejection fraction. And it was a pretty gutsy study. They actually bought the drug because it's not on market anymore, tested it, and he won the Young Investigator competition. And I think that study and then Protection Acute MI, which was actually a negative study looking at delta protein kinase C in terms of acute MI effects, that didn't show a significant effect, although they need to increase their sample size. I think this is going to be the future for cardiology and the ACC in terms of what we're going to be seeing in the next couple of years. So that's why I think it's important to, even if these trials are negative or slightly positive, I think in terms of more benefit in our patients with acute MIs, this is where the future is.
Tony?
Well, today was hypertension day, more or less. There
Right.
were two rather large hypertension trials from Japan, Oscar and the Nagoya Heart Trial, and they really looked at the same question, Randy, and that was comparing ARBs to calcium channel blockers. And, you know, the calcium channel blockers have not been as effective in reducing renal disease as the ARBs have, and so it's been thought that that would be a significant advantage for them. In Oscar, what they did was they tested double dose ARB olmesartan
Right.
against low dose olmesartan plus a calcium channel blocker, and they really found no difference. Again, teasing out a subgroup, which shouldn't be done, but teasing out a subgroup, the olmesartan calcium channel blocker was superior in reducing heart events in patients who had cardiovascular disease to begin with. A caveat, it was also more potent antihypertensive,
Okay.
so it lowered the blood pressure. Essentially, Nagoya Heart found that the two drugs were equivalent.
Or is it the same? Peter, what do you think about those studies?
Well, my only comment is I looked through these studies. I was impressed that they really had an effect on blood pressure. I mean, a lot of blood pressure studies that we see,
Right.
there's a 1 or 2 millimeter difference, which has a p-value, of course, that's 0.00, God knows what. But here, there seemed to be about an 8 or so millimeter difference in the blood pressure. And that's an impressive drop, and enough, I think, that might help patients regardless of whether one is better than the other. So if you lower blood pressure using these combinations, it's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think the overriding issue here perhaps is that diuretics are losing some of their luster as first-line drugs, and I think these studies kind of allude to that.
So you think that'll make a difference in practice? I mean, that's what
Absolutely.
you're saying. Nalini?
Absolutely. And I think that, bringing back, thinking about looking at molecular targets, looking at that in terms of the long-term benefits, that's using that combination was key in that. Because we know they're all going to lower the blood pressure. But at the end of the day, what you want to do is target antioxidant effects,
Right.
looking at rate control, looking at all these different things, and combine it. And I think that's where our future is going to be in terms of making decisions on treating hypertension.
Super. Okay, well, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back with an overall look at this fabulous panel's feelings about the highlights of the meeting. We'll have that for you just ahead.
You're watching CardioSource video news coverage of ACC.11 and I2 Summit 2011.
Meet Brian, retired truck driver with repeat decompensated heart failure. He and his wife want to travel, but he's been admitted to the hospital again, this time with severe dyspnea. Follow Brian's journey from admissions to treatment and release from a hospital setting, and then to post-release care, with all the steps along the way aimed at reducing his chance of being readmitted. Experience the hospital-to-home learning destination. Hall D, number 3347, to learn about innovative technologies and solutions aimed at reducing hospital readmissions. Plus, hear from leading experts in the field and learn how they're implementing new processes to reduce readmissions in the H2H theater.
Well, immediately what we noticed is patients telling us that they really preferred the radial approach. When we first started doing this, they came to us expecting that we would be doing this via the femoral approach. They came expecting a prolonged bed rest time. They even warned us. They said, look, I've got a lot of back problems. I'm going to have trouble laying flat. And when we started doing it from the wrist and they were able to get up and ambulate right away, they were really thrilled.
Welcome back to CardioSource Video News. We again have our great panel, Dr. DeMaria wanted me to say stupendous panel of Drs. Block, Rajamanan, and DeMaria to look at the take-home messages of this meeting. So I'm going to ask each of you. Nalini, I'm going to start with you. Sort of what were the highlights of the meeting for you?
Well, I really enjoyed all the valve sessions. I was a topic coordinator with Blaise Carabello this year, and we set the program up to really a launching board for the TAVI results. And so we had experts from all over the world talking about guidelines, how we're treating our patients now. We had a very nice session on looking at the clinical trials in statins and medical therapy, had all the leading trialists there, and I think that there's some future for long-term trials in that, and then really set it up for what was going on with the Partners trial.
Tell me what did you learn in I mean, setting those up?
Well,
So
I think the most important thing is that we need to think about the biology of the heart valve. I think for a long time we've been calling it degenerative disease, degenerative mitral valve, degenerative aortic stenosis, and I think what we need to think about now, it's an active biology that can be targeted with stent therapy, probably with multiple medications, and trying to find out a combination of how we're going to slow the progression in our patients.
okay, Peter, I'll come back to you in a second. What was the highlight for you?
Well, the highlights I'll get to the highlights in a second. I was impressed by the interest that everybody showed in just structural heart disease in general. I was part of a 4-person panel at a talk about all valve disease, and the room was packed. I was really impressed. I expected 7 people, and we had almost 150. So lots of interest. Highlights of the meeting: partner, and partner.
Okay.
And then I also think that if you want to talk about those, I'm happy to do it. But the radial artery came rising up out of the muck. So the radial artery bypass graft trial is a free radial artery trial, positive trial. I thought that was interesting and probably will change the way we think about doing bypass surgery. And then the radial artery catheterization issue, that will probably change the way we think about doing heart catheterizations. And it was a PCI trial. So patients will benefit because they won't have to stay lying down for a long period of time. Partner is partner is partner. Everybody knows those results.
Tony?
We can't forget about Stitch, because that's a trial that's been going on, it seems, forever. And,
Since we finished training.
Right. It's one of those things with great potential, and it'll always have great potential. But
That's how people have described me.
but Stitch, we finally got some results I think you could sink your teeth into. Surprisingly, evidence that testing for viability doesn't seem to segregate out a group that'll benefit by revascularization, and perhaps reminiscent of courage, that medical therapy does pretty well in these patients, and revascularization, at least the way the trial was carried out, had only a minimal benefit.
I want you to keep coming up with this, but are there practice changers? And you mentioned that with the radial artery and all that, but as you look at the science and things like that, are there things that you think will impact the way we practice?
Well, I think definitely. I mean, these things all take time to get into the guidelines, but I think that to me was the what we're seeing now is going to be a big transition, a big shift in cardiology. I'm really looking forward to the next couple of meetings, because as we're getting all these new interventional technologies, we're understanding where we can go. And as the molecular biology is coming out with a lot of beautiful data, we're going to be able to tie these together.
Give me an example where the molecular biology will take us. I mean, where do you think that's going to impact our practice as it develops?
I think it's going to impact in acute coronary syndromes. It's going to acute in in these bleeding outcomes, looking at these new anticoagulation drugs. And then and of course, I have a bias because I'm an aortic valve biologist. I think we're going to be looking at aortic valve sclerosis, targeting it with statins and ARB and maybe bisphosphonates in the future, and we're going to try and slow that progression. I mean, it's going to be kind of
that's kind of cool.
obvious,
Tony?
yeah.
Well, I think, as Peter said, I agree with him that radial
Radial.
artery catheterization. I think, me personally, I'm going to do a lot less viability testing, and I think that I'm going to be a lot less aggressive in sending patients with heart failure due to ischemic heart disease to revascularization.
That's interesting, Peter.
Yeah.
So I said partner, partner, partner at the
Yeah.
front end, and everybody knows the results of the partner trial. But we don't change the way we practice until the FDA says we can use
Says
these
go,
devices.
go.
Right.
So I think one of the most important things that came out of this meeting is the financial evaluation of the partner data from the B group, the non-surgical candidates against medical therapy. And the bottom line here is it costs $50,000 per year of life for elderly patients
Quality
to
year.
use this new technology. That's pretty reasonable, compared
Yeah.
to an ICD and so forth.
Right.
So had it been $175,000, I think everyone would have said, whoa, I knew this all along. This is a little bit of a surprise to me that it was as low as it was. And I think we will see these technologies more quickly because the cost seems not cheap, but certainly reasonable.
Good. Final thoughts about the meeting? Anything, that you haven't talked about?
I thought, as compared to some years that we've sat here when we really didn't have many game changers, there's been a couple of game changers here. A lot of energy at this meeting, and also I think some reflection on why it is that research trials are leaving the United States and going overseas.
Interesting.
I was at a lot of
Interesting.
sessions that this is really becoming a concern. Is it financial? Is it regulatory? But whatever it is, trials, phase 1, phase 2, especially device trials, are leaving the United States, and we've got to reverse that.
Excellent. Sort of final thoughts for you, Nalini?
Well, overall, it was an outstanding meeting. The poster sessions were fantastic. I
Good.
chaired a couple of those, and a lot of young investigators. I think bringing up the fellows and bringing up the new faculty into the program is critical for the college for the future success.
Absolutely.
So that was a lot of fun to see.
Peter, final thoughts?
Lots of energy at this meeting. I was impressed by the number of negative trials. There were a bunch of those. I always smile when I see a negative trial because the people involved will always stand up and say, but if I look at this sub study and a group of patients that have 6 toes and get this device or drug, you will find that there is a P equals 0.045 difference, and shouldn't we do more testing and more trials? Sometimes you just have to say it's a negative trial, guys, and no one's so far been willing to do that. On the other hand, that's what pushes research
Yeah.
forward, and hypothesis generating issues are not a bad thing.
Right.
I think you're right. There has been a lot of energy here. I appreciate the input of all of you, even at the times when some of you look brain dead to me. But your input was fabulous. Seriously,
Thank
great
you.
panel.
Thank
I've
you.
learned from each of you, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us during the ACC11 and the I2 Summit. We hope you've enjoyed all the breaking scientific news and the in-depth analysis we brought you over the last few days. We hope you'll join us again for coverage of the European Society of Cardiology meeting in Paris this coming August, as well as the Transcatheter Cardiovascular Therapeutics meeting in San Francisco this November, and also in November, the American Heart Association's conference in Orlando. CardioSource Video News also brings you daily reports on cardiosource.org, so be sure and check in regularly. And for all of us at CardioSource Video News, I'm Dr. Randy Martin. Have a safe trip home.